give me the point. 15, 16.
Okay, I think we'll get started. I know there was a long line to try to get lunch here, so people probably are going to try to come in. We were scheduled to have almost a full house in here, which I'm kind of surprised but not surprised considering the amount of information we're going to be sharing with you. My name is Joe Menta. I'm with Student Assessment at the Bureau of the Academic Bureau, and I'm here with my colleague Rhonda Kempton, who's at the Special Ed Bureau. And what we plan to do is share as much information as we possibly can, given all of the major changes that are happening once again in terms of student assessment for this year. The idea here is to provide you an opportunity to see some of these changes. If you have some questions, we'll welcome the questions because we need to hear what's on your mind, because I know there is a lot of questioning that's going on out there in terms of what does it mean for this year, especially for students with disability. So let me start by saying that when I first thought about doing this presentation, I thought it would be a fairly small group, and I would hand out this one sheet paper, which is still a pretty good one-pager, highlighting all of the different changes that are happening in terms of student assessment for this year. And then when I realized that the group was going to grow, I figured I'd make this into a full presentation where I could sort of demonstrate and show you some of the different websites that we're referring to, or the different things that you're going to have to be aware of. So hopefully you had an opportunity to download the presentation. If not, it is online. You could download it. You could share it with others. If you're planning to do some workshops off of this, a couple of things of caution. Be careful what you tell people, because there's so many things still that are not totally settled. And I'm hoping to be able to share with you facts. Because what I'm hearing, or what we're hearing a lot of times, is these rumors that are going around, and we want to make sure that people understand what really is, as far as we know at this point, what really is going to happen this year in terms of student assessment. So let me start by saying, hopefully, and I believe this is the new accommodation form that was just posted, hopefully today. As you know, the accommodation form is where we register all students with disabilities, as well as 504 students and EL students, so that we know ahead of time what kinds of accommodations and support they are going to need during assessment. This is critically important because in a lot of cases it means that the students will either need some special material, or they need things to happen on their computer ahead of time so that they get their accommodation. So this form, which we've had for years, has evolved with all of the changes that have happened. The movement from CNT to CAPT for language, arts, and math, towards smarter balance, science still remaining the same in terms of being CMT and CAPT, but at the same time, the inclusion now of smarter balance as our main assessment. So therefore, this is the form that would be filled out as part of the IEP or the PPT process. Now, because it's a brand new form, probably a lot of you will not see this. Well, let me ask, how many of you use an IEP system like IEP Direct? Okay, so here's the deal with that. In order for this to appear in your IEP system, we needed to finalize this, which we just literally did a couple of days ago, and we need to communicate with all your IEP vendors, including IEP Direct, so that they could make the changes on your IEP system. So therefore, what you're going to see when you're logging in, if you happen to need to do a PPT tomorrow, is the old form. I believe what's going to happen is that once we share the new form and the new way of downloading the information off of that, your IEP system will be able to transition what you put in the old form to the new form. I'm not totally sure. This is sort of new territory because there are new features to it, but it's going to be the responsibility of your IEP vendor at some point to make sure that this information is filled out correctly, because we're going to pull from here for the purposes of testing. So, if I was to recommend anything, I would say if you're going to a PPT in the near future, I would just download and print off a copy of the hard copy of it, use that as your model, and then when your IEP system has uploaded the new page, you'll be able to use the paper version to relate what it is that the student needs. Okay, and what I'm going to do after each slide is basically pause and see if there's any questions. So any questions on the new accommodation form? Okay. Again, this is only for the Smarter Balance testing and for the CMT capped science. Second thing, how many of you are responsible or are familiar with where the accommodation information gets inputted? Okay. So the website with the big circle and X through it now should look familiar. That was our accommodation website. That website no longer exists for the purposes of collecting accommodations. And that's because, again, we've transitioned from CMT and capped into Smarter Balance. And last year, even though we gave the Smarter Balance test, we had dual systems in place, meaning you were collecting information for us and putting it in the bottom website, and then we put the information in the top website for you, but that caused some issues because there was a lag time. There was only one time we were able to do it for you. You had to verify it by going in there, and if there was any changes or any updates, you had to do it yourself. So this will eliminate the dual system. This means that there is no accommodation website, the way it used to be, and everything gets entered directly into the Smarter Balance website, meaning AIR or TIDE, for those of you who were responsible for any testing last year. So again, the accommodation website is gone, and all information that's going to be drawn from here is going to be uploaded into AIR's TIDE. Yes? Oh yes, yeah, we've had it ever since we had Smarter Balance. So basically that website, TIDE, will open up in early October. And in early October you can either manually enter accommodations, or again, if you use an IEP system, you could wait until you decide when your district or school is ready to do the upload into AIR's TIDE. And therefore, it's going to be a direct linkage. Anything you do is going to go directly into the place where the student is going to be taking the test. There's not that intermediate website anymore. Yeah?
The TIDE is for both the Smarter Balance and for Science and
Great question. The question is it both for Smarter Balance and for Science? Yes, that's another radically different thing this year. We no longer are going to have what we used to use to provide us with the science test. We're going to have the same people that give us Smarter Balance also give us the science test. So when the kids are registered, they're all going to be registered in one location for all of the Smarter Balance testing and all the CMT capped science testing. That also has ramifications for those kids who take the science test online. Remember, we've always had the ability to give the science test online for special ed students or for 504 students, and we used to use something called MIST, right? That, of course, has to go away too, because it's not going to be provided through this other website anymore. All testing is going to be under the AIR system. So in reality, it's going to be a much cleaner, much more direct system for all of you, because once you register the students, the majority of the testing, we won't even talk about 11th grade yet, but the majority of testing will all go through AIR. It all is housed in one place. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just going back to the accommodations page.
Yeah.
If this page is not uploaded into IEP Direct, where you bring a hard copy to the PPT, which you can, because then once it is loaded into IEP Direct, we're going to have to then go into a finalized document. Would you recommend that we amend that IEP, or can we just go in and make changes?
There's no, it's a good question. The question has to do with whether we have to amend an IEP. Remember, this is officially not a form of the IEP. This is used simply for data collection. It should reflect what's in your IEP, typically your page 8. So even though the form is changing from the old form to this form, if the information is basically the same, there's no amendment process, it's just the form that's changing. So in most cases, as long as you're reflecting on this page what you're asking for in the IEP, then you're all set. It's not something that's extra or requires you to inform parents about it. It's just a data collection form. Yeah.
You're talking about the upload.
Yeah.
Will, if the district uploads, will it also include students who are outplaced, or is there something in the system that includes that?
So the question is, will the upload also include the kids that are outplaced? Similar to what we've always had in the past, the outplacements have their own access to, in this case, Tide. And they will be able to do their own upload right directly into Tide. So they would be able to put in accommodations for the kids that are outplaced to them.
Because currently we're not able to do that directly. So that was something to check.
Yeah. Yeah. So all outplacements as well as all districts have their own account. They had it in the accommodation website, and they'll have it in the new Tide system where all the accommodations will be collected. They'll be the ones that would be responsible for entering. Now, you should have access because they are technically your students. So if you're sending students and you're responsible for students who are outplaced, you should be able to see what accommodations these students are getting based on what was said at the PPT. Okay, so this is a little promo. This is basically a sort of an introduction to all of the changes that are happening this year. And we're going to cover a lot of information in the next hour or so. We have made available both an online and live courses or presentations that really go into depth about all of the changes and all of the things having to do with accommodations and special ed. So if you go to the CERC website, you can register for either the online training, where it's just an online course, and it'll give you a whole bunch of information as well as links, as well as material, or you could come to some of the live presentations that we're going to do throughout the state. And those live presentations we do at each of the RESCs throughout Connecticut. So, similar to the fact that the new accommodation form had to change, the learner characteristic inventory. Now this is used to register students who are taking the alternate assessment. So this is for a very small percentage of students with disabilities who qualify for the alternate assessment. The form itself is going to be housed again in the same place. in AIR. So now you're starting to see how AIR is going to be sort of the basin for all of our assessments. Everything, including all alternate assessment, science test, smarter balance, is all going to reside in AIR's system. All of the information you're going to be providing to us, whether it's accommodations or whether it's the LCI for students who qualify for the alternate assessment, that's all going to rest inside the AIR system. Again, because we're trying to eliminate all of the different places you had to go to submit tests, the same thing is happening with the alternate assessment. And that includes the alternate assessment for science. Remember the skills checklist science for grades 5, 8, and 10 doesn't go away because the regular CMT cap science doesn't go away. And we used to capture that through the MI portal. What does go away is the MI portal. So that now, for your teachers who are going to be submitting the science-only part of the test for kids who are taking the alternate assessment, will submit it through, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but through AIR. So really in the long run, this is going to, even though there's a lot of changes we're talking about, the key thing here is once you have established a username and password in this system, it allows you to test a majority of your kids. I won't say all because I'll give you the exceptions. Now, because MI goes away, the Measurement Incorporated website, that's going to have some other ramifications, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But any questions about this? So remember, your teachers would have submitted the skills checklist science using this bottom website, which no longer is the case. They're going to submit it on the top website. Yeah?
Probably a stupid question, but
Most stupid questions.
you just sent out a big invitation to training. This is all going to be covered in the
Yes, absolutely, yes. Yep.
I told Joe, couldn't say this over and over again enough times. Like every slide, I'm like, say it again. I pretended I was in the audience and just said, what if?
So again, you know, I'm looking at these slides and I'm seeing all of these changes, but the key thing here to remember is that we're consolidating a lot of the data collection in a lot of the places where we used to send the teachers to actually complete the test. And that's key because I think it's going to simplify your life because they're not going to ask you, I lost the username and password for this, or I lost the username and password for the accommodation website. It's all going to be in one place. Since you brought up the idea of the alternate assessment having its own workshops, those are also available both online and for those who want to go to the live version. We'll have live versions of those workshops for teachers who are giving the alternate assessment. Now, if it hasn't been communicated to you, those teachers, and by the way, last year I think we trained over 3,000 teachers in Connecticut to give the alternate assessment. Those teachers are covered for the next 3 years. They don't have to take the training again. There may be a little bit of informational things they need to know before they actually administer the test, but they don't have to go through this required training. Remember, this is a required training that we say because you're working with a very special population, you have to know the ins and outs of how to give this test. Yeah?
The
the online training accessible to folks that are deaf and teachers who are deaf and hard of hearing?
The question is the online training accessible for the teachers who are deaf or hard of hearing? Yes, we're looking into including the closed captioning to it, but there is a script that goes along with each of the slides. So I just mentioned that about 3,000 of the teachers in Connecticut took the training last year. So how do you know, if you're responsible to find out which teachers need training and which teachers don't, how do you know which teachers you need to send to training? We've had a place in the MI portal where certain administrators, either yourself or your district test coordinator, had access to look up all the teachers in Connecticut who were trained. Now here's the deal with this, and this is why you guys are kind of the lucky few in the state. Didn't I say MI is going away? Well, it's going away really soon. And we're not, I don't know how long it's going to take for us to transfer the information of all the list of teachers from here to the new site. So if I was you, and you have access to it, or know somebody who has access to it, look up all your teachers as quickly as possible, because what I'm hearing is by the end of September, this site totally shuts down. So it would behoove you to get that information about who your teachers are as quickly as possible so that they don't, you know who they are and who needs training. Yes, it is. It's going to be transferred, but there's going to be probably a bit of time before we figure out how to take it from here into TIDE, actually into AIR. So, but this is open and this is accurate right now. So I would recommend you get that information now instead of waiting. Okay. One of the big elephants in the room. So I'm going to have to be really careful what I say here, because there's things I could say and things I can't say. I could say that the governor of Connecticut has stated that for 11th graders this year, Smarter Balance Assessment has been replaced by the SAT. I could say that. What I could also say is that it still hasn't gone through the full process of state board approval. But again, the reality is the SAT will be the test for all 11th graders, including all special ed students, except for those kids who would qualify for the alternate assessment, that small group. And then the second bulleted point about this is the process of registering for accommodations. So let me ask, how many of you in the past have been involved with registering special ed students in your school for SATs? Okay. So who does that for you?
Well, my old school was the counselors.
The counselors, right? Traditionally, and I say traditionally because that's basically the way the SAT through College Board is set up. Traditionally, a school counselor was the go-to person in terms of applying to the College Board directly for accommodations. And of course, that's probably still the mechanism that could be used. But here's my question to you, and my statement to you going forth from here. Is that going to be either doable or appropriate when I'm certain there's going to be a lot more special ed students now who are going to be taking the SAT? And is it going to be the responsibility of just your, and again, this is just a question that you may need to take back with you. Who, if it is your school counselor, that's great. They probably know the procedure. They know what to do. They have access to the College Board site where they could register and send the information to them for approval and all of that. There is some state involvement in all of this, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But what you need to figure out is How much of an increase, if you happen to be in a high school, how much of an increase will it mean for your school counselors or for your entire staff if we're moving towards testing all special ed kids with the SAT?
So my question is probably more for Lana to bring back to the due process unit. So this violation of IDEA, it's taking away PPT's authority to actually recommend and implement part of their program, which is accommodations identified in the IEP or state-based testing. And I'm saying I think this is a question that probably needs to go back to the attorneys. I'd really like to know the answer to that, because in my opinion, this is violating the educational rights of every child who has an IEP.
Right. So the first question is, are we making available, or is College Board making available all the accommodations that are requested in a PPT? And the assumption is yes. You're going to apply for whatever the child needs. So, and this has been a bit of a discussion with both College Board and really taking a look at exactly what they do offer for the SAT. And I will say, and again, this is all very new, and a lot of this is still up in the air, but all accommodations that we give right now are available through the SAT.
They are not.
Okay, so these are the kinds of things I was hoping to be able to hear from you if you know of cases where something like that happens, because I want to hear, because we're right now in the middle of discussion with College Board to make sure that anything, like you said, the IEP is a legal document. We cannot deny a student an accommodation. And in Connecticut, we will not deny anyone whatever they need and qualified at the PPT. Now, there may be some ramifications, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but go ahead.
I guess yes, they may have all of the accommodations, but they decide if they're giving them or not.
Right.
That's the point, is it's the PPT who makes the decision.
Yes.
That's what I heard.
Yes. Yes.
Taken away from the
Yep.
PPT and is given to the college.
Right.
And that's where the violation stands.
Right. So the violation would I would believe, stand if they refused. Right? Now, if you're applying for something and they say, okay, you're getting it, there's no denial of services. Right? If you're asking for a Braille version of the SAT because the student is blind, and they send you a Braille version of the SAT, then everything's good. If you're asking for a scribe, if you're asking for a reader, if you're asking for whatever it is that you're asking, because it's in the student's IEP, and you go through the process of applying for it, and you get the letter that says you're allowed to give it. Here's either the material, or you have to have somebody in place to provide that accommodation. Then we have no issue. The question becomes, and again, this is all new to me because we've never been involved in it at the state level. The question becomes, how often, if ever, are kids denied? Okay, so that's something worth talking about, because we need to know what factors would cause a denial. Here's what we're hearing. It could be, what we're hearing is because you're supposed to submit information to them, they need written information that says this is why the student needs something. A lot of, I believe, and again, stop me if I'm wrong, I believe the application typically involves somebody submitting maybe the child's IEP, maybe some other documents. The College Board reads over all this documentation and then sends you a letter of approval. And by the way, that's a 7-week process, I heard.
Yep. I'm just going to also point out that that's what they point as a guideline, but I had to call after 3 months of not getting an answer for kids who slipped through the cracks. So that's a concern also.
Yeah. So here's the promise that I'm going to make based on what I'm hearing from the people above me, that we're committed in Connecticut, because this is our state test, to not deny any legitimate accommodations for any child who is qualified through the PPT process. Now, there may be a situation where the College Board may see a denial of it. We're still going to have our hands in it in terms of the approval process. We're going to be able to look at what accommodations or supports are requested, and we're also going to be able to look at if those accommodations are going to be provided or not, and we'll have a system in place. And again, this is all, again, as I'm saying this, there's going to be an awful lot of information that's coming out for you. So what I'm trying to be here is both accurate and also give you the idea that we're still looking for specific guidance around this so that it makes sense for all of us. It is our state test. SAT was a test that you chose to take. It's now serving two different purposes. And we recognize that, and we want to make sure, and we really had some very deep conversations with College Board. We want to make sure that all our groups, including EL students, are serviced in a way that they were traditionally serviced when they were given the state test. Yeah.
Well, this is an extension
Yeah.
to that question. I appreciate that.
You wanna wear a mic?
The extension of the question is, case scenario PPT recommends, I don't know, whatever accommodation you can get. ETS says, no, we're not going to do that. Family takes us to due process because an entity that we have no control over is a denial. I would like to know what the guidance from the due process unit is going to be on that, and what they're going to be talking to telling hearing officers about and training them on at this point. Because this has the potential, I'm going to say the word, to become a class action lawsuit against districts and the state for discrimination.
Again, just to repeat, if there's ever a denial, we as the state still have the ability to provide the accommodation. Now the question here is, okay, so then what is the purpose of that score? And remember, that score for us serves a different purpose than the student. And for the student, it's for admission into a university or college. For us, it's for accountability. So there may be a point where there's a discussion about if the College Board says no for admission purposes, and we say yes, then you may not possibly be able to use it for admission, but you will use it for accountability purposes in the state.
So the test will be given twice in school versus on a Saturday by application?
It will be given during the school day, yeah. It's not going to be on a Saturday, yeah.
So then kids who want to use it for admission would have to take the test twice?
Well, here's the deal with that. Remember, if you are asking, remember, it's their test.
Right.
It's their test. They're the ones that determine whether an accommodation meets their approval. If you, as a child, decide that you absolutely need it and you think you qualified, then there may be issue. But if a student decides, well, I know I'm not going to get this, I'm going to take it without whatever accommodation I believe I need, then that score would count. It really depends on how it's going to be processed. They've always had certain standards, and what they say to us is the SAT has been around for 100 years. It's used as an admission test with certain standards. They recognize that students have disabilities, and they recognize that they can provide accommodations. And I'll tell you, I looked at what accommodations they offer, and basically they say, we'll accept any accommodation that's not, even if it's not on this list, if you give us a justification for it. But you have to be able to justify it. But it does look identical to the accommodations we've given in the past. Yeah.
And I'll give preface to saying I haven't done this in 5 years. But
Yeah.
when I applied to have a deaf and hard of hearing student have a sign language reader provided for the test,
Yes.
they denied it.
Yeah.
And they said that it would alter the standardization of the testing.
Yeah.
They finally allowed me, and this, if you don't understand American Sign Language,
Yes.
you get this.
Yeah. No, I do. Yeah.
They allowed me to sign it
Yeah?
in English word order using ASL signs.
Yeah.
So just think of any language you know,
Right.
the syntax, you had to put it in English syntax, but you could speak it in Spanish.
So again, let me say that it's amazing that you brought that up, because that was a conversation we were having with them yesterday. We're still, at this point, making sure that everything we've always allowed is going to be provided during testing because it's our state test now. Now, how this all is going to play out in terms of the purpose of the test and what, it's still part of the negotiation. But just to be upfront with you, this was a decision made to drop Smarter Balance and go with the SAT, right? Because for various reasons. So this is what we need to work with. We still are very, very firm about the fact that we have kids who have needs. And we are not going to deny anything that we've ever done in the past for this new test. Now, we're still making sure that we are clear on what's allowable and not allowable, what they see as. So let me give you an example, since you brought it up. EL students, and I don't know if any of you are impacted by this. EL students in the past have always been allowed to have extended time. Now, extended time would be an issue if the student was not special ed, because only special ed and 504 students are allowed extended time, which is an accommodation. And therefore, part of the discussion is, we want to make sure that these group of kids, and probably these EL students who are new to the country, probably would not have taken the test anyways. But now we're forcing them to take the test. So what are the ramifications of that? So those are the kinds of nitty-gritty discussions that we're having. To let you know, I'll have to give Ellen Cohn a lot of credit. She's unbelievably forceful in her attitude that makes sure that we understand that these kids have had the opportunity in the past to take a state assessment with certain things. We want to make sure we don't lose them. Again, how this all plays out is way beyond my pay rate, but it's just to let you know that it is seriously in the front of our discussion with College Board.
I have two separate questions, so I don't know if you want to bounce back because I saw their hands up too. One, kind of going off the 504 piece. In the years I've been applying, so I'm the SSD coordinator at my school. I've had one 504 kid ever granted accommodations.
Okay.
Static when that did happen. Is that something we're going to have to work out with them? What exactly they're looking for, and what's reasonable that we would be?
Right. I will say there's going to be a need to do presentations throughout the state just based on the new SAT test once it gets all approved and everything. I think there's going to be specific information for school counselors, for principals, for everyone who's involved to understand what this transition looks like and what the role of the Connecticut State Department of Ed is in it. Because it is their test, but it is our test in the sense that it's our state required test. So there has to be a way to make sure that if a 504 student who does, we've always said 504 students, as long as you have a written plan, they would be allowed any accommodation that a special ed student would. If we know that things aren't happening that way, we have to get involved. But again, this is new territory for us, so we're hearing these stories. So yeah. Go.
To kind of piggyback on
Yeah.
that, one of the hurdles of getting an accommodation for the College Board is to obtain the assessment information. So was there a consideration of increased burden on the districts in terms of the number of evaluations now they may not be necessary for?
Yeah.
In typical,
Yeah. So you're saying you would need to supply old assessment information.
Cognitive information, for example.
So whether the student has gotten some kind of formal testing done to them, and supply that information to them.
Right.
Yeah. Again, Probably you know more about the application process than I do because, you know, it's something that's been done traditionally at the school level, traditionally by the school counselor, and probably, if I had to guess, traditionally for more mild disabled students than severe, or, you know.
About college entrance.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
The reason for
Yeah.
taking the test, not everybody's configured.
Yeah.
In your discussion, so if you're saying then the local school district can provide what the student needs according to their IEP, why do we have to go through the college board? Why can't we look at a model that allows us to upload, like we do for the other tests right from the IEP?
Yes. Okay. So here's what I could say about that. The SAT is a test that's owned by the College Board. If you're planning to use it for the purposes of college admission, they have a certain procedure in place that they have to, and they're dead serious about that procedure. If you applied, and again, I'm going to say something, and please don't say this is going to happen, all right? There may be a two-tier system where you could either apply it to the College Board or apply it to the state. If you apply to the College Board and you get acceptance with that accommodation, you're good to go. It counts for everything it needs to. It counts for both accountability and for admission. If you apply, if you know either the child doesn't qualify or you think whatever, there's going to be a possible second tier where you would apply to the state. We grant approval. The score will sit for us for the purpose of accountability and everything it has to do for Connecticut, but it may not be appropriate for what SAT sees it in terms of admission.
When you're doing the training, you'll also be training on how to go ahead and apply for the SAT?
Yeah, so the question has to be, how do you go about applying? Probably, for those of you who have, students have gone through the process, there is a specific procedure on it. You know, there's a specific website. You have to qualify to be a person who can actually even submit the information to that. You have to get parent permission to submit these documents to the College Board. All of that is going to be worked out through either training through College Board or joint training with the Connecticut State Department and through us. The question is, for example, I'm not sure in some of your schools, even if you've ever had anybody process.
I'd have to check.
Yeah, so you may not even have anybody in place.
But the second part of that is, given we're an outplacement,
Yeah.
it's not incumbent upon me or have the ability to release any of that information. So the state might want to have to, I would recommend looking at what that guidance would be, because now it would become the district's responsibility, because they're the only ones who release any of that information. They're not my records.
Yeah.
That's right. So, so that's something to put it down in our notes.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
another burden for the districts to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of details. I mean, yeah, that have to be worked out. You first, go ahead.
So before you go out and do your trainings,
Yes.
please have in place a complaint thing that is in place, because when these start coming back as denials, everyone is going to need to know what they do and where to put.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you didn't hear that, you have to have a way, again, we have to have a mechanism. One of the things that we have to be able to monitor in the state is all accommodations that were asked for and whether they were accepted or denied, and also whether they were actually given. I mean, part of our responsibility at the state level is to report to the feds in terms of how many kids receive accommodations. So we're going to be dependent on a third party to make information available to us so that we could do our part in terms of monitoring. So it's critical. And again, this is all fairly new to us. There's only a couple of states in the country that have gone this road of using the SAT for state purposes.
Do you have an idea of when we're going to be giving this assessment? Is that going to be a part of the process? If it's 7 weeks normally, I'm terrified how long it's going to take when they're inundated from the entire state.
I can't share any of that.
Come on, not just make it up.
No, I can't. No, I can't.
Something close
Oh my goodness, you got to play this game with me, huh? Well, what's a typical SAT thing?
Depends on whether you're doing it in spring or fall or whatever. I mean, there are windows in which it's not as fast.
Yeah. Yes, there is a specific dates when yes. Remember, this is a national/international test. They're incredibly stingy with this test in terms of exposure. So that's all I need to say about that. Yeah.
So there's some great research out of Gallaudet University saying that deaf students perform better on the ACT than the SAT. Yeah. So is that not? I mean, it seems.
Remember, this was a statewide initiative decision that came about. Well, you guys read the newspapers? Did you see what happened last year? I mean, this was a huge debate about, you know. So, and the idea was this is the most popular test given, has to be given anyways. It could serve dual purposes. It gives districts a little bit of cash because the state's paying for the SAT now for that one time.
I'm just curious, if a student were denied and you said, okay, but for state purposes they can take it for accountability, now they're going to take it separately without the accommodation for college admission, is that even going to be offered? Since why would anybody want to pay for it when the state is paying for it? You know, as families, we pay for it.
Yeah. So again, the state's going to pay for it for that one time that it's given, and then, but everybody knows that for some kids they like to take it two or three times.
So there'll be other opportunities.
Well, of course, you're a private individual. You could take it as many times.
I'm asking if it's going to be offered.
Not through the State Department. Through, I mean, there's going to be Saturday sessions throughout the year and stuff. Now, here's an interesting bit of tidbit for you. PSATs. If any of your special ed students you gave the PSAT to, and you applied for accommodations on the PSAT, and they were given approval, that's good from then on. So now, I'm not saying start giving PSATs to all your 10th grade special ed students because it gives you a thing. But if you did have a situation like that where you had a PSAT child in 10th grade who you did give the PSAT to, and they were given accommodations, they have on record that that child has it, and it would apply to this year. Yeah.
I promise this can be like the last
Okay.
It's two-part though, so I'm assuming we're going to be...
I feel like I did all the other slides for no, and all right, go ahead.
The model of the new SAT that comes out in March,
Yeah.
I'm assuming we're basing this on?
Say that again?
The new SAT that's coming out in March.
All right, so I can spend about another hour and a half and just went to training. You know, the SAT is totally changing too, to be more like the Common Core. And there's workshops that are happening throughout the state that both College Board is presently giving, and hopefully eventually the State Department is going to get involved in sharing information of how even the test itself has changed drastically. It's more Common Core based. It looks and feels differently. It serves different kinds of purposes in terms of getting what they believe more accurate information about a child's ability. All that information is out there. There's also a resource through the Khan Academy. They've joined with College Board to make a tremendous amount of resources available for free, by the way, for anyone. Because there is a recognition that some kids, I've heard, take special classes on SAT. Is that true? So, right there is, how do you level the playing field? So one of the things is providing, one of the things that they're doing nationally is providing free resources for schools through the Khan Academy to prepare students for the type of questions they would be facing on the new SAT.
My question off that though is the essay portion is optional. What is it going to be? Is that
okay, so I can't. Good thing you brought that up. I can make the statement because I heard my bureau chief make it yesterday, so I'm allowed to say it. There's no essay part to the SAT. We're not going to pay for that part of it. So it's just the math and the language art portion, not the essays. So traditionally it was 800 max points for the math, 800 for the reading of the language arts, and then 800 for the writing portions. We're not doing the writing portion. We're just doing those two required sections.
Going back to something you said earlier about the fact that the State Board of Ed has not yet gone through the whole vetting process and approval process of this.
Yep.
They tabled it at the last meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I would just want to convey to them, if you were able to do that there are quite a number of colleges and universities who are no longer requiring
That's right.
SATs because they don't feel it's an appropriate test
Sure.
for students'
Yep.
abilities.
Yep. No, I think we all have heard that it's not it doesn't have the same weight as it used to in some places, and certainly I don't know what to say about that other than the fact that we've made it our state test, and therefore we're trying to make it work in a way that makes sense for Connecticut.
I have a couple of questions, but the first one is parent permission, because we really can't submit any information until we have that release signed. And in some cases, it's hard for us to even get parents to the table for a PPT. So if a parent doesn't release for us, what do we do for an 11th grader?
So the question has to do with parent permission, and I'm assuming that parent permission has to do with submitting information for accommodations. Great question. Outside of the fact that it's required for you to submit it to a third party, I don't know. I mean, it's what's happening now. I mean, I don't know how common that is right now for kids.
Is it a release of information?
Yeah.
Or is it a required component of the data that needs to be sent to participate in the statewide assessment?
Well,
not sure, right? Because I don't know what those questions are that they ask.
Do school counselors typically have access to all your IEPs? Okay, so they do, but it's just the transmission of that information to a third party.
And I'd like back to this gentleman's point. Sometimes we do at a triennial review, we'll do file reviews in 9th grade rather than reassess cognition. But oftentimes the College Board does ask for a recent cognitive evaluation. So it seems like we need to be rethinking and testing students just so that College Board can have that information when in fact we might not feel as a PPT it's necessary. So that's a concern. I have a question about their documentation need for extended time. I've gotten things back that have been rejected and denied, and they want information and they want demonstration that the student actually uses or needs the extended time, which is often a survey for the teachers, and it's a ton of information that the teachers would have to gather. For medical disabilities, they often ask that they have an updated within the last 12 months medical documentation. I know Ellen Cohn is probably all over this, but it's just for those parents who are not really engaged with children's education, it's very hard for us to get that information. I have a question about page 9 in the IEP, because it doesn't list...
Yeah, we got a slide for that. This slide has taken a lot longer than I thought. And it doesn't even have a picture.
I know. Just one other question before you...
We're only really supposed to be saying that.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all we said.
That's all we said, by the way.
The College Board often, too, for 504s or IEPs that are less than 4 months old, they will often reject them because they're new plans. So that's just
again, these are the kinds of things, I hope you wrote some of these down, because these are the kinds of things that we're pressing on in terms of, we don't know what their process, we know what our process is in terms of approving accommodations and supports. So we're comfortable with that. Now again, it's for a dual purpose, and I keep repeating that. SAT keeps reminding us that this test has a certain standard that's recognized nationally and internationally that says this score is meaningful because that. So.
Not an SAT question.
Yeah. Wow.
No, what I'd like to do is invite your bureau chief to one of our executive board meetings, and I'm just not sure if it's a G. Is that
no, it's Abe.
Abe Christ?
Abe Christ.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That was easy.
Absolutely. Yes. Do it. Actually, I think it would be great to have at Concase. Yeah.
I will say the other day when I was down talking to Joe, Janet was with Abe and they were like head to head on this conversation with somebody, and I thought, well, that's really important. They were talking about, I'm just telling you that, you know, Janet and Joe are your best advocates for these students with disabilities around assessment. They're just fabulous. They think of everything. I just sit there and say, so what if, and what if? And I'm kind of the questions that I try to think that you would think of. I don't know about the College Board enough to ask those specific questions. On the other hand, we did also speak with, just this morning, we had a side conversation with Kim Traverso, who oversees the school guidance counselors, right, and where she might come in terms of what kind of training and what the expectations might be, and how does that have to happen. Whether we agree with what this decision was or not, right? How do we make it work best? So that's more maybe in the implementation, right, of knowing what we have to do once we know what it is.
Yeah, I will say there is a need, and I know with Michelle Rosado, who's going to be our sort of lead person in the State Department of Ed in terms of the SAT. I know she's working, and that's really her sole job now, so I know how tremendously difficult all aspects of this is going to be. I know she's looking to form groups fairly soon at the district level to get people to talk about these things and really, you know, get that kind of feedback going. So that's an important part of it. Okay, can I leave the slide yet, or? Remember, I just said those two things, so, yeah. All right. So I think I mentioned this before, but let me just say it again. For the science, CMT, and CAPT, we used to be able to give the science test online for those kids who qualified through what's called MIST. That was the online platform to actually give the test and for it to be submitted to us. Again, it all rests now in AIR's system. So where the kids take the Smarter Balance test, they'll be taking the science test too. And it will be the same look as the Smarter Balance test in terms of the tools and features and all of that. No, it's only, good question. No, it's a booklet test by default still.
But the MIST will be on.
MIST will be gone and will be through there. Yeah. Okay. There's not too much to say other than what someone pointed out here, is that page 9 is going to have to change. And it has to change for a couple of reasons. One of them has to do with the fact that now we're given the SAT, and there's no way to reflect that on there. The other is a change in EL policy. And so that and maybe this is in the crowd that's going to get me in trouble with this, instead of me talking about what the new EL policy is, just let me say that because of that, it also is going to require us to change page 9, but there is more information around EL students in terms of how they're processed in statewide testing. Okay, yeah?
So because page 9 is part of the IEP,
Yes.
I would imagine that a change would require an amendment.
Okay, so the question is, and I was waiting for this question, thank you. This is the one you thought of. Yeah, this is. So the question is, because page 9 is going to change, and let's say you've already had a PPT, does that mean you have to have an amendment?
Okay, so of course we could have a variety of answers to that, right? It could be anything, I know. And unfortunately, just like every other state comment that you get, I'm not going to be able to say that. But for now, we're actually looking at also what could be a technical edit, because we're still saying they're taking the grade 11 assessment with these accommodations, correct? So we're looking at everything from that to where you might need, there might be a family that, you know, you're going to say, I'm at least going to give them an amendment because you know your families, or I'm going to sit down and have a PPT about this, right, and make those changes. So it could be definitely to meet the needs of all our families and their understanding of what's happening. You know, you might need to be having those conversations that, you know, this page 9, when you're having PPT now, is going to look different in the near future. This is going to be a possible change. It's going to say for grade 11 students, it's going to say SAT. Know that now, and then when we put out the guidance that comes along with the changes to page 9, we'll be able to further explain whether or not we can do that. I know that's something that Isabelina is looking at, so just have that said for now. That's all I can say. I can't say it is or it isn't.
But we aren't looking to, create that same amendment system that we had 2 years ago when we switched from CMT cap to the districts all deciding to do Smarter Balance.
Right,
So,
just
yeah.
to swap page
Yeah.
to 9 or something, if it's something that's, not needing to be discussed that way. So, but you definitely have to inform the parents regardless of what that is. That's the other side of it, especially after this morning, right? We have to be making sure they're informed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know that the guidance on technical ed, it says there's nothing on this page that is a technical ed right now. So we have to change that.
We know that. Yes, we do know that. Yes, because Mike wrote that. Yes, I know.
Okay, yes.
Just in terms of technical support and
Yeah.
things, so if MI goes away and we go to AIR, are there requirements that are similar to what was needed before and where tech people did a lot of things?
Yep. So the question has to do with technical support, since we're doing away with MI and now going through AIR. Basically, the state really made that switch last year when we went to Smarter Balance, because AIR was the system in place. Let me just show you, hopefully this looks familiar to you. Let's see.
When I was talking, you were going to hear me in the back because I don't know.
You have one here if you want.
Now I'm good.
Okay.
I don't want to blow her.
Does this look familiar to anybody? So this is the system last year for Smarter Balance. This is the TIDE system where all the information from PSIS gets inputted. And by the way, that still is the case. Anything in terms of demographics and status, all is inputted directly from PSIS. So if you have new kids or kids change or whatever, as long as you make that change in PSIS, we transfer that information into TIDE. But TIDE is the system now for Smarter Balance, for the CMT capped science, for the CMT capped checklist science. I mean, anything other than the SAT, basically. Yeah.
Go back to page 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
We know that page 9 is even in these.
No. It really has to do with, once, yes. I mean, we all know we all know the process that has to happen for, like, let's say IEP Direct to make the changes.
I'm not even worried about them making
Yeah.
changes, but in the last couple of years, we've had changes come through in February or early March for a March implementation and testing.
Yeah. No, I know.
I can't do 400 PPTs.
Yes.
per
Yeah.
minute.
No, I don't. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So on behalf of all the directors in the state,
Absolutely.
I'm asking that we get it by early December at the very latest.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah,
Put it
that's.
down. Thank you. Because Pat was already on it in terms of making those changes.
Yeah.
So we've already.
We have a working model. We're really trying.
Model, we just don't know.
Yeah, we're trying to save you time in terms of the amendment process.
Right, we don't
Yes.
want to say that you have
Yes.
to do an amendment
Yeah.
for the ones that you've already had.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you would maybe talk about in the summary that you shared with parents that, the state anticipates changing this form. Once this form is in place, the following accommodations have been recommended and we will swap out the page. So basically you're saying everything that would be on that page except for not having that page.
Right. Right.
Kind of part of the...
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what you could do right now if you, again, if you had a PPT tomorrow, and you happen to, let's say, have an 11th grader that you have to discuss. Yeah. Yeah.
Believe me, we wish we were farther along too. I'd like to be able to tell you something.
That's the last page. Okay. All right. So I think this might be the last slide. So this form is guidance that has been provided both nationally, but we've also adopted it in Connecticut as a way to make sure, because we do have a brand new accommodation that we really only have had in place for 2 years, which is the accommodation of having the reading test read to students. That's a brand new concept in accommodation for Connecticut. Nationally, there's still a debate about how many kids really should qualify. What kind of disability, what kind of print disability should a child have? We heard today when we talked about the simmer and the importance of reading at the early grades. So if we're having now the potential of students taking a test which fundamentally shifts from a reading test to a test that's being read to the student, we want to be sure in Connecticut, and this is not only in Connecticut, but it's happening in other states too, we want to make sure that we're giving you guidance so that you know to the best of your ability that you're selecting the right kids. What we don't want to see is, because the accommodation is available, that we simply give it to kids that we think would be helpful, because that's not the point of this accommodation. And in fact, there's that potential of doing harm in the sense that you may lower your expectation in terms of reading ability or skills if you give up on the idea that the student can learn to read. So the purpose of this form is to ask yourselves some questions that will help you to guide you on whether you think that child should qualify for the reading of the reading test, the reading accommodation. It then, the button's not on this one, but it then, if you click on the button, it will be sent directly to us for us to have that information. This information is going to be incredibly valuable to us as we design more and more guidance around the idea of who these kids are. What resources do they need? What resources do we have in Connecticut that they could take advantage of? So all of that information is going to be available to us once we get this information back from you as to who these kids are. So this form is posted. We'll be sending you more information about where it's posted and when to use it and so on. But again, it's only meant for kids who you believe may qualify for the new accommodation of having the reading test read to them.
It says text-to-speech on it.
Yep. So either, and by the way, text-to-speech was not available last year for the younger grades on Smarter Balance. Remember, you had to, this year it will be available in grades 3 through 8. So text-to-speech is available on the reading test for all those grades. Yes? It is posted. It is posted. We're going to send some guidance around it so that people know about it, and we're going to send some information out. We're going to put it in the student assessment newsletter that we send out every week, and so on. But I wanted to give you a first view of it.
And it'll go out to IEP vendors?
There's no need to put it in the IP vendors, because you could do it directly online and just submit it with a click of a button. So you could just click on it, fill it out there, and just click a button, and it'll be. I mean, if you don't want to send it that way, you could fax it back to us. So it automatically gets sent to us. So
one of the beauties of this, and I'll yell again. One of the beauties of this, we spent a long time on this form because we didn't want it to just be something that was for us to collect data. Yes, we have to monitor at the state, but I also kind of wanted it to be a tool that would help your teachers and the people on the ground make those kinds of decisions and maybe learn something. So as you're going through, you know, you're saying, okay, does the student have an identified reading-based disability that affects the student's decoding, fluency, and comprehension? But then as you move down, it's actually going to ask, you know, do they belong to Bookshare? Right? It's going to ask those kinds of questions. So maybe you've got that teacher on the ground level, and they're looking at this and they're saying, what's Bookshare? And then they talk to somebody and they say, what's Bookshare? And they learn that there are accommodations and tools that are available to them free, right? That can help them to help the student access the general ed curriculum. You see what I'm saying? So I was also, we purposely rewrote this. This came out of SBAC's Accommodations. It's a form they had, but we made it Connecticut friendly and worked closely with Tom Boudreau and with the AIM and the IMAC and you know, all of those pieces that he has, so that we would have also places that the person that was filling out the yes nos would know where to find it if it's not that teacher or that case manager. So if you had a district test coordinator looking at an IEP maybe to fill this out later or something, you know, and sending it in, they could look on page 1, page 4, page 5. There's different places that this information may be in terms of, are they Braille, using Braille, you know, are they being taught to use Braille? Those are all questions.
So we think we...
Yeah. It was good. I have a lot of questions I'm bringing back. Oh, do you? Yes, I do.
Okay, any questions or comments? Sure.
I like the form.
Yes.
It's actually a discussion that I had with my staff.
Great.
Because, well,
Great.
new on the speed of 5, it was something 6 to 8 last year.
Right.
Correct. All right, so if we did a 6 to 8 IEP from last year, do I now have to have people go back and...
No, not from last year. For it's.
No, but I had some PPTs in the spring, you know, like in May, and they may have done that's back earlier. So they may have in May already made some determinations because I told them,
Yeah.
do the best you can.
This is not an IEP page. You could, if you have the information, you're able to fill out that page for a student that you already determined at a PPT qualifies for the reading test to be read to them. Just fill it out and submit it to us. So
You're not looking for a one-to-one if you have 10 kids that are going to have it read to them. You're not going to be checking SASs and making sure you have 10 forms? Because traditionally,
we need to know every child who's getting the reading test read to them.
that's what I mean.
Yes.
So you are going to be going back and looking for 10
Yes.
forms. So I do have to have
Yes. We need those questions answered for each individual child because we're trying to look at what you're looking at in terms of the characteristics of the child that allow you to make the decision. We're not saying what your answers are over here determined. We're saying that, have you looked at all these things? You still have the final word, but we want to know, if you said no to all of these things, why did you qualify the student? We're not going to still take it away from you, but why would you qualify a student to get that accommodation?
So you do have to go back, I think we held a meeting in May, and complete that for somebody. If they had determined in May that the reading should be part of it, since it was something involved.
Right, but it doesn't involve an amendment. It doesn't involve anything other than just submitting the form.
It's just the form.
Yeah.
Anybody
Yeah.
could look at that IEP and try to...
Yes.
So by not connecting it to it, though, it's going to make it harder on those of us that are trying to kind of police that, because usually I pull something off, and if they're making a direct connect to you, I'm not going to know if it's submitted or not.
Well, again, this could be submitted and printed. And in fact, you may want to create your own policy that says, let's print this off first and then submit it. You could also fax it. That's the other thing. If you decide you want to closely monitor it, make a copy of it, hand it out, have them fill it out. You have a copy, you fax the rest of them to us. Depends on, we're trying to give you the simplicity of just being able to fill out the form and send it directly to us, but at the same time, if you want to keep a close record on your kids and what the answers to those questions were, then that's you know.
But if you're telling me I have to do that, which you are, by saying I have to have it for each, I'm just trying to make sure.
You have to submit it to us for each. Yes.
They've already had it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like timelines are going to be really important.
Yeah.
October. Do you have any idea when training is going to be available?
Training for?
Oh, the online training, the in-person training.
Yes, so the online training is open right now for the accommodation website, the accommodation discussion. We talked about that earlier. The training for alternate assessment is going to be available within a month. We're already having live training of probably similar to this discussion, but much more fuller discussion around accommodations. There is talk about how we should roll out training about SAT. We're not there yet. So that's going to be a separate kind of training. And that's until things are kind of solidified with the College Board and all of that. So there's training that's happening on the SAT, like I said, how the SAT has changed from the old SAT to the new. So there's an awful lot of content training. There's a lot of mechanics training in terms of how to fill things out or do things. But yeah, this was really just a highlight of.
There was supposed to be actually a training already this coming Friday, and there wasn't, I don't think that many signed up, and that's probably because it's still like so new in the school year, people aren't looking at that yet thinking I need to go to the assessment training. So we postponed that one and are rescheduling some of those dates because they are by RESC, so they do a road tour.
Yeah, but check the CERC site. There's always training there. There's training through the academic office. Again, more towards content. We know a lot of things are still sort of up in the air. Hopefully, this information gave you a little, at least if nothing else, a little heads up in terms of getting back some information. I would, if I was you, do those two things, which is if you need to print off a list of teachers who were trained last year, do that early, and start having a discussion in your school, if you happen to be in a high school, what the process is going to be for your 11th graders. Yeah.
Sorry.
You promised.
Just a question kind of regarding this, because it might be something you know the answer to, but can help figure out. So I'm in a district that has a lot of students with financial need that get waivers. Is this in any way going to impact, because I'm assuming the fact that we have to pay for this because it's something we're requiring, they take it during the school.
What do you pay? I'm not sure I follow you.
Students have to pay to take the SATs.
No, they don't.
No, I'm saying under other circumstances.
Right.
Yeah. But students in financial need get waivers from their school district.
Correct.
Is them taking it during the required state test going to impact the access to that waiver? Is one way I want to make sure if there's going to be any kind of conflict.
Good, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would think those are two totally separate things. If a student qualifies for a waiver, yeah, I can't imagine that they would hold against them the fact that they got it once through the State Department. No, yeah.
The other fun thing you might want to do for homework is take the online training, because it has, right, it'll have the little quiz on there too that you can take to see how you did.
I mean, we haven't even talked about the specific accommodations and all that. Right. That's a sort of, the purpose of this was really to sort of share the big picture view of things that are changing this year. So.
I've worked with parents, so the big issue for me around assessment time is opting out.
Yeah.
It all came out with us back really big. Yeah. What's the state's position moving forward?
It's it's the same as it always has been. I mean, there is no official.
Repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question had to do with parents wanting to opt out students from testing. What's the state policy on that? And there really isn't an official state policy that says there's a. Basically, through state and federal law, we're required to provide students with testing once a year. If a student is absent or if a student refuses to take it, it's handled the way it's always been. Basically, the way Smarter Balance was handled was if the student logged in and then said, I'm done, I'm not doing anything else, that student was counted for participation. If the student never showed up or never went to the computer to do anything, that student would come up as absent. One would count for participation, one would not.
will they take it all in one clump, so it'd be only a one-day commitment? Or
Can't tell you. It's, yeah, I can't tell you. Any